Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to kind of have a little story time, and these stories sound way worse than they are, but they were fun at the time, and I was in middle school. So we're not going to judge Tiffany at all, no judging. And I obviously, if you are in middle school or high school or whatever, I don't recommend doing these things because they were stupid and they were just not wise choices. However, I have learned from them and learned to deal with my anger and any kind of issues that I've had differently. So let's start out with 8th grade. 8th grade, I had a math teacher who was a horrible math teacher. She was the worst teacher I've ever had in my life. She yelled at us. She screamed at us. She's called us names. It was pretty difficult and nasty. No one wanted to be in that class ever. And so one day she used to, well, let's go back. Every day she used to leave our class after the first like 15 minutes and go to the teacher's lounge and get a Diet Pepsi from the teacher's lounge every day. And she would put one person in charge, and they would have to be the person in charge of the classroom. And they were like in charge of like tattling basically on everybody and telling them, telling what they did wrong and who wasn't talking and who wasn't doing their work. So yeah, the day she put me in charge was the day this ended, because she put me in charge and she kind of gave everyone a turn. So it was my turn. I got to be in charge, and I was definitely absolutely not telling on anyone. So we thought as 8th graders that it would be fun to lock her out of the classroom, because if you're a teacher, obviously you need to be in the classroom teaching. And she never taught us anything. She just gave us worksheets and gave us tests, and that's all she did. So this day she went and she left the classroom, and we decided to lock her out. And she came back and couldn't get in, so she started banging on the door, screaming at us through the door. And it was quite funny. We were laughing and kind of having a good old time, thinking nothing of it. So then she started calling us names through the door and telling us that we were rotten children and cursing at us and all of these other things. And so at that time we decided to press the call button for the front office and call for the principal. And so we called for the principal and told him that the teacher had left and she was now outside the classroom yelling at us, calling us names, and he could hear her through the, you could hear her through the intercom. And so all of a sudden the speaker clicked off. You could hear like the little click that they turned it off, and she's still yelling and kicking, and we don't know what to do at this point because we're like, okay, maybe we took this too far. Are we gonna get in trouble? What's going on? And then literally seconds later you see her head flip to the side and her eyes got very large, and she starts walking the opposite way towards the office. And a second later we see the principal standing in the doorway with his keys unlocking the door, and he comes in and he says, what happened? And we all kind of explain it to him and tell him this has been a daily thing, and he said okay. We have a counselor come down to our classroom, and they're our substitute teacher, and we never saw that teacher again, so we're pretty sure we got her fired. It was funny at the time. It was amusing. Now I feel bad thinking about the fact that we may have gotten someone fired, but then I also, you know, feel kind of proud because that means no one who came after us had to deal with that kind of negativity and that kind of awful kind of teaching style. So yeah. And then also in 8th grade, this is my second story from 8th grade. One of my best friend, her cousin went to our school too, and in the last video I talked a lot about how I was picked on and stuff, and this kid just would not leave me alone. He was always picking on me, especially since he was cousins with my best friend. They were always, you know, every time I was at our house, he was at our house, so we were always around each other. So you would think that maybe he would kind of just get used to me. That didn't happen. He just decided to pick on me constantly, and so finally I had enough of it, and we were watching a movie during our cultural studies class, and we were watching Cool Runnings. I distinctly remember this whole movie. And me and my friend are sitting up front because me and my best friend had the same class, and he's sitting behind us, and he's just like picking on me and calling me names and being just disrespectful and rude. And it was just, I was over it. Our teacher had left the classroom to go make copies of whatever worksheet we were going to have to do based on this video. Because back in my day, that's what you did. You watched a video, you did a worksheet. It was kind of like a Friday type thing. So I finally got sick of it, and he continued to go on and on and on. And I, you know, obviously asked him to stop, and I told him, you know, and it was making me upset, and I was crying. And finally he pushed me over the edge by telling me that I was a fat bitch. And everyone else in the classroom started laughing. My friend is just sitting there like wide-eyed because she doesn't know what to say. She's always in the middle of this, and I felt bad. So I stood up and I told him that he was an asshole and he needed to stop. And he said, "Why? What are you going to do? Sit on me?" And that was it. I lost it. I picked up my chair and I threw it at him. I did. I threw a chair at a boy. Why? Even saying it now, I'm like, what was I thinking? What in my life made me think that that was a good choice? I didn't get in trouble because the teacher never found out because he didn't want to tell anybody. However, I still look back at it as one of those moments where I was like, I could have made a better choice, and maybe things wouldn't have gone that far, you know, if I had made a different choice earlier on in the, you know, day, in the conversation. I'd like to say that that was the end of him picking on me. Unfortunately, it wasn't. But it happened. My third and final story was my all-time favorite high school story, or I'm sorry, middle school story. Me and my best friend had most of the classes together. Her boyfriend and I ended up having one class together. It was the only class that I didn't have with my best friend. And so we talked all the time. Halfway through the year, it was our history class, halfway through the year, our teacher left because she had a baby, and we got a substitute teacher in there. And he came in, and we just completely did what we did as middle schoolers, and we ignored him and talked. To the point that me and my best friend ended up having to get separated. He separated my friend to the front corner closest to the teacher's desk, and me to the back corner farthest away from the teacher's desk. So we were on complete opposite sides of the room, and he's talking. And one day we were just in the middle of a conversation discussing stuff, and the teacher was just being so boring, I guess it was. And so we were sitting in our chairs, and I had moved up to next to him, and he's like, "Tiffany, you need to go back to your chair." And I said, "I'm talking to him. I'll move back when I'm done." And it wasn't like we were in the middle of a lesson. It was kind of like we were doing like individual work. And he's like, "No, you need to go back to your chair." He's like, "This isn't the time for talking." And I said, "Fine, I'll go back to my chair." So I went back to my chair, and I sat down, and I started doing work, and everyone got quiet again because we were doing our work. And I stood up on my chair, and I said, "John." And he said, "What?" And I said, "Stand up." And so he stood up on his chair, and we had a full conversation over all of our classmates' heads, standing on our chairs because our teacher didn't let us. That was the kind of child I was. So I'm sorry to all of my teachers. I really do appreciate all of the hard work that you did. But I was just a talker. Still am. So yeah, those are my 3 fun middle school stories. I hope you enjoyed them. Maybe it'll give you a little insight to my personality. We're gonna do high school stories later on one day. Leave me some middle school stories that you guys have, or some fun experiences, or even traumatic experiences. Maybe you had a kid like me in your classroom and it was traumatic for you. I'm sorry. But until next time, bye guys.